Rain poured steadily, turning the streets into mirrors of trembling light. The hospital's glass doors hissed open and shut as nurses hurried in and out, their scrubs soaked and shoes squeaking. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed over the sterile corridor, but outside, near the emergency entrance, a man sat curled under the flickering glow of a street lamp. Emily Carter noticed him while passing through the glass hallway on her way to the staff room. She almost didn't. Her mind was tangled with patient charts and the echo of her supervisor's voice reminding her she'd already gone 12 hours without a break. But something about the stillness of the figure outside made her pause. He wasn't just resting. He was trembling, clutching his chest beneath a thin, torn coat. She hesitated. The hospital had a strict policy about non-admitted individuals loitering near the emergency bay. Security usually handled them, and most staff learned to look away. But the man's face, half hidden under wet hair, was pale and drawn. His lips moved slightly, as if speaking to someone who wasn't there. Emily sighed and pushed through the heavy door into the cold. The wind hit her like a wall. "Sir," she called, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me?" He flinched, eyes wide, voice hoarse. Don't call the police." "I'm not calling anyone," she said softly. "I'm a doctor. You're safe. What's your name?" The man coughed hard, his body shuddering. "John," he rasped. "Just John." Up close, Emily could see the red streak climbing up his arm, an infection spreading fast. His hands were swollen, fingertips blue from cold. He needed help immediately. She stood, glancing toward the security camera above the door. She wasn't supposed to bring him in. But leaving him out here, he wouldn't last an hour. "All right, John," she said, slipping her arm under his. "We're going inside." He tried to pull away weakly. "They'll throw me out." "Not if I get there first," she murmured. The nurses inside stared when she came through the doors, half carrying a drenched, trembling man. One of them, a young orderly named Peter, frowned. "Dr. Carter, you know the policy. He's not a registered patient." "Then register him," she snapped. "He's septic, probably hypothermic too." Peter hesitated. "The supervisor." "Tell him to page me," Emily said, steering John toward an empty bed in the trauma room. "Right after I save this man's life." She stripped off his soaked coat and began warming his skin with blankets. The infection was bad. She'd need to start IV antibiotics fast. John's breathing was shallow, each inhale a fight. As she inserted the IV line, he opened his eyes again. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. "Because you're a person," Emily said simply. "And that's reason enough." He tried to smile but winced instead. No one said that in a long time. Minutes passed in focused silence as machines beeped and nurses moved efficiently around her. When her supervisor finally appeared in the doorway, his expression was stone. "Dr. Carter," he said sharply. "This man has no insurance, no identification. You're using emergency supplies on a vagrant." Emily didn't look up. "I'm using them on a human being who's dying." "That's not your call to make," he said. She turned then, eyes tired but fierce. "Maybe it should be." For a long moment, the room was filled only by the rhythm of the heart monitor. Her supervisor sighed heavily and walked away, muttering something about disciplinary review. When the doors swung closed again, Emily let out a slow breath. She adjusted the IV and checked the monitors. John was stabilizing, color returning faintly to his face. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said quietly, sitting beside him for a moment. Everyone deserves someone who doesn't look away. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. Inside, beneath the steady glow of the monitors, a life began to mend, and a promise, unspoken, took root in the silence between them. The weeks after John's recovery blurred into a relentless rhythm of 12-hour shifts and endless paperwork. The hospital's corridors still buzzed with the same fluorescent hum, but something in the air had changed. The administrators' smiles were tighter, their meetings longer. Rumors crept through the staff cafeteria like a slow-moving virus: budget cuts, new investors, a possible buyout. Emily tried to ignore it at first. Her focus stayed on her patients: the elderly woman in room 302 who refused to eat, the teenage boy recovering from a car crash, the newborn in the NICU who clung to life by fragile breaths. She poured herself into her work because that was the only place where things made sense. But every day, the walls seemed to close in a little more. It started small. Fewer supplies in the storeroom, delayed restocking orders. Then the layoffs began. 2 nurses from her floor, a janitor who had worked there for 20 years, even Peter from the same orderly who'd helped her the night she brought John in. They said it's restructuring, he told her bitterly as he packed his locker. Funny how that word always means cutting people, never cutting profits. Emily didn't have an answer. She just helped him fold his uniform and wished him luck. The next day, an email arrived from the hospital board, mandatory meeting for all staff. Attendance required. The meeting room was filled to bursting. The new chief administrator, a polished man in a gray suit named Mr. Langford, stood at the podium with a rehearsed smile. His voice was smooth, every sentence laced with corporate polish. As many of you know, he began, we've partnered with Meditech Holdings to ensure financial sustainability. This merger allows us to continue serving our community while maintaining operational efficiency. Emily felt her stomach twist. Operational efficiency, 2 words that never meant anything good. Langford continued, unfortunately, this does mean certain adjustments. Some departments will be downsized, others consolidated. We must align resources with productivity metrics. Around the room, whispers rose. Nurses exchanged anxious glances. A surgeon in the back muttered, they're turning us into a spreadsheet. Emily raised her hand. What about patients who can't pay? What about those we treat in emergencies? Langford's smile didn't falter. We remain committed to care, he said smoothly, but all patients must comply with the new admission protocols. We can no longer accommodate non-reimbursable cases. I'm sure you understand, Drive. Carter, compassion is important, but so is sustainability. Her pulse quickened. You're talking about turning people away. I'm talking about keeping this hospital open, he replied, his tone hardening. If that means enforcing rules, so be it. The meeting ended in uneasy silence. When Emily left the room, she felt like she was walking through a ghost version of her hospital. Same walls, same halls, but hollow now. Later that night, she sat in the staff lounge, sipping coffee gone cold. The rain drummed faintly against the window, a rhythm she remembered from the night she'd found John. She wondered where he was, whether he'd managed to stay warm, whether he'd kept the fragile spark of hope alive. Her phone buzzed with a message from her friend, Nurse Carla. They're cutting the outreach clinic. Tomorrow's our last day. Emily closed her eyes. That clinic was the only place that offered free care to the city's homeless and uninsured. Without it, dozens, maybe hundreds, would go untreated. The next morning, she went to the clinic early. The waiting room was full, thin faces, tired eyes, people clutching tattered coats. She moved from one patient to another, checking blood pressure, listening to heartbeats, pretending she didn't know it would all be gone by tomorrow. When she stepped outside for air, she saw a man rummaging through a trash bin near the parking lot. He reminded her of John. The same hollow cheeks, the same desperation. She almost called out, but her voice caught in her throat. For the first time, she felt powerless. That night, as the lights dimmed and the hospital hallways fell silent, Emily stood by the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there were people like John, unseen, unheard, and now unwelcome. She wondered if compassion had any place left in medicine. In the reflection of the glass, her face looked older, wearier. The rain started again, streaking down the window in silver trails. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and whispered, almost to herself, if saving a life isn't enough reason anymore, then what are we even saving? Behind her, the hospital intercom crackled softly, another announcement, another shift, another reminder that the heart of the place she'd once loved was fading into something she barely recognized. The news came on an ordinary Tuesday morning, a murmur that spread through the hospital corridors like the slow ripple of a dropped stone. A mysterious investor was coming to meet the board. No one knew who he was or why he was interested in a struggling hospital drowning in debt and bad press. By noon, the staff cafeteria was buzzing. Nurses speculated that it was a pharmaceutical giant. Some thought it was the city council stepping in. Emily didn't care much at first. Whoever it was, it wouldn't change the fact that half her team was gone, and her patients were being turned away for not having the right insurance. Still, something in her gut told her this meeting wasn't just another boardroom shuffle. When she was summoned to the conference room that afternoon, she nearly didn't go. But the message from the board secretary was direct. "Drive. Carter, your presence has been specifically requested." She walked into the large glass-walled boardroom, her white coat wrinkled from a long shift. The room smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne. At the far end of the table sat the board members, including Mr. Langford, looking as self-satisfied as ever. Beside them stood a tall man in a charcoal suit, his back turned as he looked out the window toward the city skyline. Langford stood when she entered. "Dr. Carter," he said with forced politeness. "Thank you for joining us. I believe you'll want to meet our new investor." The man turned. For a second, Emily forgot how to breathe. The suit, the trimmed beard, the confident stance, it took her a moment to recognize him. But then she saw the eyes. Those same weary, gentle eyes she had seen on a rainy night months ago, full of fear and gratitude. "John," she whispered. He smiled. Not the broken, uncertain smile she remembered, but one grounded in quiet strength. "Hello, Doctor." Langford cleared his throat. "Mr. John Miller has acquired a controlling share of the hospital through his foundation. He'll be overseeing the new restructuring process." Emily stared, disbelief flickering into shock. You bought the hospital." John nodded. "Let's just say life took an unexpected turn after that night. I got help. Real help. I reconnected with some old partners, got back on my feet, and rebuilt what I'd lost." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "You saved my life, Emily. And you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. People matter more than profits." Langford interrupted, forcing a laugh. "Mr. Miller, we're all very pleased, of course. I'm sure you'll find our current operational structure." John raised a hand, and the room fell silent. "Your structure," he said calmly, "is the problem. You've been running a hospital like a factory. That ends today." A few board members exchanged nervous glances. Langford's smile faltered. "With respect, sir, you can't just." "I can," John said simply. "And I will. From this moment, patient care comes first. No one will be turned away because of money. The outreach clinic will reopen immediately. And as for anyone who thinks that compassion is bad business," his gaze fixed on Langford, "they're free to find employment elsewhere." The room went silent. The air seemed to hum with tension, and something else. Hope. Emily stood frozen, still processing it all. John turned to her again, his expression softening. "I wanted you here today because this place needs people like you, people who still believe in why we started this work. I want you to lead the new community health program. Full authority, full support." She blinked, stunned. "John, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," he said. "This hospital gave me a second chance at life because you refused to walk away. I want to make sure no one else is ever left out in the rain." For a long moment, Emily could only stare at him. Around them, the board members shuffled their papers, uncertain whether to applaud or panic. She felt a lump rise in her throat, the same mix of disbelief and emotion that had filled her the night she found him. Finally, she smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. "All right," she said softly. "Let's save this place." John nodded, his expression one of quiet triumph. Outside, the clouds broke apart, and sunlight spilled through the glass windows, painting the polished table in gold. For the first time in months, the hospital didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide hospital windows, turning the once drab lobby into a space that felt alive again. The scent of coffee and fresh paint lingered faintly in the air. The hospital, their hospital, looked nothing like the cold, corporate shell it had become under the old regime. New community banners hung near the entrance. Care for all, hope for everyone. Emily Carter stood near the reception desk, watching as volunteers handed out warm meals to families waiting for appointments. The old outreach clinic had reopened just a week ago, and already the waiting area was full, not of frustration or fear, but of quiet gratitude. She smiled as she passed a little girl holding her mother's hand, the child's thin arms wrapped in a blanket with the hospital's new logo stitched across it, two hands joined around a heart. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a promise. From across the hall, John Miller approached, a file tucked under his arm. He looked different now, still the same man she'd rescued that night in the rain, but grounded, steady, with a calm confidence that seemed to radiate warmth. "Busy morning?" he asked, his tone light but proud. "Busier than ever," Emily said, scanning the bustling lobby. "We've had 30 walk-ins today. Half of them wouldn't have been seen under the old system." "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." John handed her the file. "These are the blueprints for the new free care wing. Construction starts next month." Emily flipped through the pages, her heart swelling at the sight of the plans: wide-open patient wards, family waiting areas, even counseling spaces. It was more than she'd dared to hope for. "You're really doing it," she murmured. "You're turning this place into what it was always meant to be." John's smile softened. "We're doing it. You gave me the courage to try." A pause settled between them, the kind that carried more meaning than words. Around them, nurses and volunteers moved through the hallways, laughing, chatting, helping. The sterile quiet that used to haunt the building had been replaced by a gentle hum of life. Later that afternoon, Emily made her way to the pediatric ward. She found one of the younger nurses reading a story to a group of children. The sound of giggles filled the air, a sound she hadn't heard in this hospital for a long time. For a moment, she stood in the doorway, her chest tight with emotion. It was working. When she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, the sky was gray again, clouds heavy with rain. The scent of wet earth drifted through the wind, a memory stirring somewhere deep inside her. Across the parking lot, a thin figure sat near the entrance, shivering beneath a tattered blanket. Her heart clenched. The scene was achingly familiar. Without hesitation, she walked across the lot, kneeling beside the man. He looked up, startled, his eyes wary. I'm not causing trouble," he stammered. "I just needed to rest." "It's all right," she said gently. "You look cold. Come inside. We'll get you something warm to eat." He blinked at her, uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I don't have any money." Emily smiled. "Good thing that doesn't matter here." Together, they walked toward the entrance. As the automatic doors opened, she caught sight of John standing in the lobby, talking to a group of volunteers. He looked up, saw her helping the man inside, and a quiet understanding passed between them. For a moment, their eyes met, and the memory of that first night, the rain, the fear, the choice, flickered between them like a shared secret. John's voice carried softly across the hall as he greeted the newcomer. "Welcome," he said. "You're safe here." Emily guided the man to a chair and handed him a steaming cup of soup. Around them, the hospital buzzed with quiet purpose: doctors, patients, volunteers, all part of something bigger than themselves. As she looked around the lobby, Emily realized that this, not the sterile perfection of polished floors or the hum of machines, was what healing looked like. Not just medicine, but mercy. Not just care, but compassion. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the glass. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like a blessing. John joined her, standing quietly at her side. "Looks like things have come full circle," he said. She smiled, watching the man sip his soup, warmth returning to his cheeks. "Maybe kindness always does." They stood there in silence for a while, listening to the rain, both knowing the truth that had brought them here, that one small act of compassion could ripple farther than anyone could ever imagine. And in that moment, beneath the sound of the rain and the hum of life around them, the hospital, once a place of despair, pulsed with something rare and enduring.